Should be going, but I'm gonna let Zoom finish its little progress bar first. There we go. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to wasmCloud Wednesday for January 25th, 2023. We have a pretty exciting agenda today. No bias, but I am going to be giving a demo right to start. But let me go ahead and share the agenda so that we can get a good idea of what we're going to be talking about today. So this is on our wasmcloud.com dev repository. This is kind of like a deploy preview. But what we've got first is a demo about it's a distributed wasmCloud application. I finally got around to setting up my Raspberry Pi again. So of course I had to put wasmCloud on it. And I set up a little instance in the cloud for just a little bit more fun. We're going to be talking about a markdown file that we recently published, which is a short, medium, and long-term wasmCloud roadmap, which we're kind of calling now, next, and ideas. So really important for us to be talking about what we plan on working on, at least in the short term, so that we can start talking about things, basically just as much visibility in the community as possible. And we had a really great discussion in our community Slack about what we are calling actors, which is, well, actors, but our WebAssembly modules that are pure business logic and separated from capabilities. And I really just want to kind of continue that discussion kind of in the open forum, and anybody who missed the thread maybe be able to put some more input in there. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the demo. So you all have seen, various applications that we have working with wasmCloud running with logic and WebAssembly, and a couple of capabilities to fulfill the non-functional requirements. Now, I really wanted to show, because I just set up my Raspberry Pi, I wanted to run wasmCloud on it, and two, wanted to show a pretty sweet distributed application that's running across, when we say things, when we say, hey, wasmCloud works across clouds, different edges, works on your local computer. I really want to show that working and what that really looks like. So what I have here, I set up a few wasmCloud hosts ahead of time just to, remove that little step. But I've actually got a wasmCloud host running in GCP. This is like kind of the little in browser console. You don't have to read any of this text. It's just me running wash control get host. But I have a wasmCloud host running in GCP. I have a wasmCloud host here on the right. You can see it's like my local network. So this one is running on my M1 Mac that's right here. And then on the left, this is actually my Raspberry Pi. So recently, we kind of updated some of our aptitude repositories. And so all I had to do after imaging this Raspberry Pi was curl the apt install script and then run apt install wash, which was pretty sweet. I was able to run wash up with no issues. And that actually used to be kind of a point of friction in the Raspberry Pi area, because we didn't always publish a target for ARM Linux. And, you had to kind of build wash from scratch, and that took a while. So super excited to get that working. And what I wanted to show you was, first of all, if we go to the wasmCloud dashboard here, this is on my local host. I've got one, like I said, ARM Mac. This one is connected. It's on GCP. It's actually on an x86 Linux box, which is cool. And the one on my Raspberry Pi. And when I say that all these are connected, all I mean is that I'm running a NAT server on the GCP instance, and then both of the wasmCloud hosts that I'm running on my computer are connecting to the NAT server that's running in GCP. So all of these being connected just means that they all share kind of a NATS connection. There's various strategies for that and everything, but that is the wasmCloud lattice. All the things that run in this lattice, whether it's a piece of logic or a capability, can communicate seamlessly just by virtue of being on the same network. So I've got some other exciting stuff planned. You may have seen, if you've worked in the wasmCloud community or seen one of our examples, we have an example called the KV counter. And the KV counter, hopefully the README does it justice, is just a WebAssembly module that can accept HTTP requests, and then it increments a counter in a key value store, and then it returns that new value. And so there's a few components that go into this application. And instead of kind of going through the process of launching them individually on the wasmCloud dashboard, I prepared a WADM manifest. And WADM is, let me go ahead and get the repository for you, the wasmCloud Application Deployment Manager. This is kind of what we use for declarative applications in wasmCloud. It's got a very fun name, very easy to exclaim. And the way that it works is really similar to the way that a lot of people deploy declarative workflows now in any cloud native application, which is you can write up a YAML file, or you can write JSON if you really are vehemently against YAML. And you say, these are the components for my application. Please make them run on, according to a specification, this many running on certain hosts, and just make it happen. I don't care how it happens, which we and I generally really like. So let's talk through this manifest a little bit. I have the wasmCloud KV counter application or actor, and it has two link definitions. These are basically saying at runtime, I want to link to an HTTP server and the Redis capability provider. And you'll notice that for Redis, I'm connecting to like a local instance. And for HTTP server, I'm listening on a local address. And this is going to be important. So I have a host running in GCP on the Raspberry Pi and on my local MacBook. Since I'm showing this demo from my local Mac, I want to make sure that I run the HTTP server on my Mac so that I can hit the local endpoint. I'm going to run the actual actor on the Raspberry Pi, and then I'm going to run the Redis server in the cloud because that's where I'm hosting my database. And all of this I'm kind of sketching together for a demo application. But really what I'm trying to convey here is that being able to be flexible here with your application components, because you probably run your database in the cloud and you may want to access an HTTP endpoint from a specific area, is really applicable to different applications. So here's what I mean by saying that it has a specific scale property. So I want to make sure to run one key value counter actor, and I called the spread on Pi. But the requirements is that it has to run on a host that has the label Raspberry:Pi. Very fun. And if you look at my actual wasmCloud dashboard on the Raspberry Pi host, I have that label Raspberry Pi. And then here I'm saying that my wasmCloud HTTP server has to run on a host that has the laptop Mac label, which I have on my local wasmCloud host. And then my Redis capability has to run on a host that has the cloud GCP label. So you may be familiar with this from the Kubernetes angle of like taints and tolerations. Being able to say, hey, please run these things on a host that matches this specific set of requirements is really important. So the way that you can deploy WADM applications is through the wash app CLI. So wash is the command line tool, and the app subcommand. Of course, we mark this as experimental because we're constantly iterating on this, but this lets you take that manifest and apply it to a lattice. So this essentially scans all the hosts and then puts things where they need to be. So we can create this application by saying wash app put, and this takes the YAML manifest, it uploads it to WADM, and then puts it in its list. So there's a few different deploy states. The default, as soon as you create it, is undeployed. So what we have to do is deploy the application, and wash app deploy works with the name and a version. The versions are important because you can upgrade, you can change your specification over time and deploy newer versions. So this is all going to happen pretty fast. WADM is pretty dang quick at figuring out where things need to go and sending out the appropriate control interface commands. So as soon as I hit wash app deploy, it's going to start publishing links between the few components, say, hey, Raspberry Pi, start the KV counter, and then tell my other hosts to start their appropriate providers. So as soon as we do that, we can see if we come back to the wasmCloud dashboard, kind of starts gathering information, figuring out what it needs to do, and then there, call it done. So we create the link definitions to say, listen on port 8080 and access the key value store in GCP. If we take a look in the, figure out my terminal stuff, take a look in the logs, we can see that our Raspberry Pi started the KV counter actor, and we started an HTTP server on our local NAS, or on our local wasmCloud host. So now we can actually go to localhost 8080 and hit refresh and get our really fun KV counter application. So every time I hit increment here, it's sending an HTTP request to my local capability, which then forwards the request to the actor running on the Raspberry Pi, and then accesses the key value store that's in GCP, which I don't actually think I have. Oh, I do. If we take a look at the Redis CLI in GCP, this counter default is essentially what we're incrementing every time, which is 70, just to show you that this is for real, connecting to a database on the other end. And if you hit refresh, it gives you a nice kind of sparkle of fireworks. So that is a couple of things. I really wanted to bring WADM back into the spotlight because declarative applications are really important as soon as you get past that initial experimentation phase. And the ability to come in and take a look at this manifest and say, maybe this isn't living up to the scale that we want it to, and update the individual actor to run 25 copies. The ability to simply change it there instead of changing your whole CI or anything like that is really important. And the fact that when I was writing any of these applications, this is actually the demo app right off of the GitHub repo. Of course, none of it details exactly where a database is going to be living or whether or not this can run on a Raspberry Pi or in the cloud. And really wanted to showcase a small example of a distributed application with wasmCloud, because this is one of the coolest things that we do is make that work. So yeah, happy to, I think that's about the end of my demo. Happy to answer any questions or talk about, kind of the setup of what I had to do for the Raspberry Pi. I'm actually happy to just like recreate it right now if you want me to, because it's pretty quick. But yeah, I'll stop sharing for a moment and just kind of answer any questions. I didn't look at the chat if anything came up there.
Did you, Matt?
Sorry. I have a quick noob question. One of the things that I think it'd be a pretty interesting sort of extension to this demo is, let's say you had like a fleet of Raspberry Pis. I'm assuming that if they all had a similar tag and a similar set of capabilities, and let's say I have 5, you're spinning up 25 replicas, and I have my thing running, I'm clicking increment, and you go and off screen decide to either kill the hosts on 4 of them or unplug 4 of your Raspberry Pis, it'd be cool to show. And I'm assuming that it just sort of will say, okay, I need 25 replicas for my hosts are down, let me spin up 20 more on my Raspberry Pi and continue going from there.
Exactly. Yeah. So as soon as you, go ahead.
No, continue this. Sorry.
Yeah. So the whole WADM reconciliation loop, basically, anytime you make a meaningful change to the wasmCloud lattice, meaning that like either requirements aren't met anymore or you don't have enough to fulfill the requirements. Like if you had 2 Raspberry Pis with that same label and said, hey, run 20 copies of that actor. And so it, spreads it does 10 across each, for example. Then as soon as you kill that one, if you killed that one host or like unplug the Raspberry Pi, WADM immediately gets that host stopped event. It sees that there are only 10 instances of the actor and will spin 10 more up on the remaining Raspberry Pi.
That's awesome. Follow-up question: if the Raspberry Pi was just by chance mid-processing of one of its actor calls, would the lattice recognize that it hadn't completed that one and say, okay, we're going to then continue it on the second one to make sure that that increment goes through?
Yeah, that's a great question. Any of the, Kevin, do you want to, I saw your hand shoot up. I've got an answer, but I can let you take it.
Yeah, the general plan or the general design is that if the host, for whatever horrible reason, vanishes in the middle of an actor processing its request, that request is basically gone. If the request was, something like it was maybe handling a message from a durable stream, then the actor would then fail to acknowledge that inbound message, and then so when the actor restarts in a new location, it'll just pick up the message that it had failed to process before. So I guess put another way, wasmCloud itself isn't going to be able to pick up an actor's execution in the middle if it failed on a host that dies ungracefully, but there are architectures you can use within wasmCloud that will make it so that that actor can recover the unprocessed work.
Gotcha. Thanks. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, Stephen, I think you were next. And I think Oren had a great question in chat too.
Cool, thank you. I was just wondering what you provisioned the Raspberry Pi with for Watom, like when you created the labels, when you set it up, did you use a tool or did you do it manually?
Yeah, here, let me go ahead and show you. So let me see. This is Watom running right here.
Nice.
So I'm going to go ahead and just stop this wasmCloud host. So essentially all that I did was apt install wash, which you can do after you run the little command to curl down. Where is it? You can curl down this Debian install script, which just like adds our repository to your little list and apt. And then the actual command that I ran was this one. So I added a label using the host underscore syntax. This just takes anything after that with the key and value raspberry equals pi and gives it a label raspberry equals pi. I ran wash up and I added the flag nats host, which that's the IP address of my GCP instance, which is where the actual nats server is running. I could always run this with a leaf node and so that it kind of extends the network. But just for this demo, I figured this was the easiest path. And then I also added nats connect only to make sure that if I typed my IP address wrong, like I couldn't connect to nats, that it wouldn't start up a nat server on its own. And this kind of just ensures that that I'm not accidentally going to start a new lattice. I would only start a wasmCloud host connected to my existing lattice.
That's so cool. I love that part about wash where you can put these environment variables before. You can just put multiple with like a space, right?
Yeah, totally. So if I do like hosts community call equals fun or something like that.
So cool.
Then I can actually, how can I get if I get the inventory of this, I think I can see the labels.
We're on inventory.
So if I look at that host, you can see that I have Raspberry Pi and community call fun. So the labels are completely arbitrary. You can make up your own. The only ones that you can't change are these host core ones, which are core. They're not overwritable because they describe the type of machine that it's running on, which can be really useful. And I'm not really sure if there's like a risk to people overwriting these, but it's just not something that it's not something that you should, you could always add in basically other labels. No need to overwrite those individual ones.
Thank you. So cool.
And before this on the Raspberry Pi, I mean, if you're in the community call, you saw or if you're in the community Slack, you saw my meme this morning. I installed a firewall and I blocked myself out of SSH connection to the Raspberry Pi. I was like, I could figure this out, or I could just reimage the whole thing. So I just use the Raspberry Pi installer. I put Debian Bullseye, or the Raspbian that has Bullseye under it, and then start it from scratch. And it's like apt update, apt upgrade. I know Tailscale's the right way to do it, but come on, I'm just hacking it together. I'm, that I reimaged it this morning. It really takes only a few minutes, and the wash install script is pretty seamless. No bias. Yeah, let me take Oren's question really quick. Does Wadham specify how a deployment of new code would roll out? And Wadham doesn't explicitly specify how, but it's just a complete rolling upgrade. So if you essentially, when you deploy a new version of an application, we are under the same application, we're doing a reconciliation loop across the lattice with the new constraint. So if I change to, from one instance to, let's actually do a new version. So if I change from wasmCloud KV counter 0.4 to 0.4.1 and has the same number of instances, we'll actually take those and stop the instances of the old actor because they don't belong anymore, and then start the new instances of the KV counter actor. Essentially, it's like a diff between the two, different versions of the individual application. It's also worth mentioning that if you have two different applications that have similar resources. So if I had KV counter 1 and KV counter 2, those two individual applications are managed separately. So if I said, the first application requires 5 instances and the second application requires 10, then we'll be running 15 because you are doing it per application. And what that really lets you do is take individual apps as they are. You can delete one completely and not tamper with another application. And for actors, it's less applicable, but it's really important for things like HTTP servers, where you want to make sure that you're running an HTTP server no matter what other applications happen to be running in the lattice. Actually, a great question. Great questions in the chat. CJ had a follow-up around failover, around like deleting instances out of the, deleting hosts. What happens is when you, this is actually handled, as Kevin said, by the wasmCloud lattice itself. If you have an instance of one actor on one host and an instance of an actor on another host, those are kind of equally likely to receive invocations just because we're doing NATS round robining. And if you were to delete one host out of the lattice entirely, that one actor is no longer in basically an interest graph for receiving invocations. It automatically fails over to any available compute. And that's just kind of something that you get out of the box with wasmCloud. You don't need Wadham for it. And you don't need to explicitly configure anything to do that. Bailey, you posted a question from YouTube. That was a comment on the YouTube. Hey, YouTube. The question was, can you split traffic between actors via Wadham? And I guess that's kind of a similar question, but this is actually handled exactly by the lattice itself. So by virtue of these actors being stateless, reactive compute that are connected to a lattice, in wasmCloud, extra instances of an actor are automatically load balanced between. And there's some extra things that can make that more efficient, that things like NATS does for us, like making sure to keep traffic local instead of reaching out to a central NAT server when possible. But that whole system is what allows us to do the automatic failover, or what allows us to load balance between different instances that all handle the same and kind of scale up in a horizontal or a vertical way. Let's see, I'm getting to read more chat. Kevin, I think you have got something to elaborate on.
Yeah, you kind of went into it. There's a question in there about whether or not wasmCloud can prefer I guess a beefier host, or to configure or fine tune the round robin stuff. So the first point is when traffic is distributed across actors, it's done pseudo randomly, not necessarily round robin. So we're not, for a number of reasons, most of which are related to things like availability. I'm trying to figure out how not to go down a rabbit hole, but if you round robin traffic in a distributed system like that, and something in the round robin pool is causing problems, then you'll just get the same problem over and over again. You can kind of poison pill your whole system. So having the pseudo random choice is a safer way to make sure that what you're doing is actually going to get delivered. But then if I want to control the shape of my network traffic, I can do that with a NATS leaf node. And the way the leaf nodes work is I can put one of those wherever I want to, and it basically acts as a network traffic gateway. And so I can, everything on the quote unquote inside of a NATS leaf node is going to prefer to stay inside. So where I put my leaf nodes and how I connect them to each other can control exactly how the traffic preferences go within my network. And so if I have a leaf node set up and I've got, say, 30 actors on the inside, and on the other side of the leaf node, there's, one or two copies of that same actor. Within the leaf node, all of that traffic is going to stay local. But if, let's say, that everything on that system goes down, that entire leaf node goes away, the lattice is automatically going to pick the actors that remained up on the other side of that leaf node. There's a lot more to it than that, and there's a ridiculous amount of detail on how all that stuff works, but I think that's probably a good high level overview.
Yeah, awesome questions. It's so fun to kind of dive into intimate mechanics of the lattice and how WADM works, because it's just so much taken away from the developer needing to worry about from the beginning with the distributed application. It's very cool. Well, that took up a nice little chunk of the call. Really great discussion, and thank you all for letting me do a little demo. I'm going to vote that we move on just a little bit. I want to make sure that we get to the rest of the agenda, because we got some important stuff, but we can always come back and chat more about Lattice or WADM things after the fact. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about the wasmCloud roadmap and vision, some of the things that we see ourselves working on and prioritizing in the open source space as wasmCloud maintainers over the next, we call it now, later, and ideas. So the kind of short term, longer term, and then things that we've kind of brainstormed but haven't quite found the correct place for yet. Let me go ahead and share that roadmap. And Taylor, I'd love to invite you to come on and chat through it, because I think that you essentially drafted this one up, maybe with Bailey as well, but we'd love to have you chat about it.
Yeah. So we just kind of did an initial pass on it. We wanted this to be a community thing. So the make sure, okay. The plan here is to make this kind of an idea of where we're going as a project, what we expect people to see coming from the wasmCloud project. We just really wanted to make sure people knew where we were heading and what we wanted to try to do. And so that's meant to be very clear here. We're trying to avoid the problem of there being like a specific roadmap with specific dates. And, like this is an open source project, like people sometimes don't have the time to contribute because, life. And so we're trying to avoid saying that, and we're trying to get just a clear vision of what we're doing and where we are, where we're going with it. So to be clear, as I state in that opening paragraph when I wrote this up, like not everything on here has to be like not everything has to be on here to be considered official work or important or anything like that. It's just really meant to be like guidelines for what we're doing. And if we want to show what that guideline links to, Brooks, that'll keep people entertained for about 10 seconds. Okay, anyway, so in the roadmap, we have now, next, and later. So now are the things that we kind of have a definite plan for what we're trying to do, what we're going to be working forward with there. And those first two kind of items are working on a SQL v2 contract, just so that it's actually more production worthy, is the main concern there. Because I know a lot of people will want to use that. And then we also are going to work on finishing up WebAssembly. So what Brooks demoed today is still very like alpha level. And so we need to like basically validate some design assumptions, making sure we're supporting custom scaling algorithms, like deployment and infrastructure around how you run WebAssembly, guides, documentation, all that kind of stuff. And then like also removing some underlying dependencies that we don't think we need anymore just because of how things have evolved since we kind of started the thing. So that doesn't mean this is the only thing that will be, these two things, the only thing that will be worked on. It's just giving you an idea of what the maintainers are doing. And so I'm sad Matt left before we got to this, but like Matt and other project maintainers, we're also making, please come contribute feedback here. We could have missed things of the various sub projects inside of wasmCloud that aren't necessarily covered on here that should be covered on here. So this is open in a PR, which I'll have Brooks link out in the meeting chat and Zoom, and Bailey in the streams. So you can go comment on anything that you have concerns about or whatnot. So the now is what we're trying to work on like right now. Next is something that we consider very important. And they're kind of like what's on deck. That's a very baseball term and very US centric, I guess, but I play a lot of baseball growing up. But the idea is, right, like it's the next thing up. It's not actually being worked on right now, but we want to get these done pretty soon. And this is a great area to look at. If you're like, I really want to contribute to wasmCloud, this is a great thing to look at. It's not, like I said, comprehensive by any means, but it's kind of some big things that we want to add in. So this is stuff like adding things for capabilities for like examples, documentation. We'd like to have something similar to some of like what you see in the JavaScript ecosystem where you have like examples. Here's how you add logging. Like, so it has hello world with logging. Here's how you add this. Here's how you add this. And even that, like if you're doing it for the first time and capture most of your instructions, that kind of stuff would be very valuable. We're going to work on V2 versions of various contracts. These are all kind of similar ideas that we want to make them more production ready. And we also want to match up with what the rest of the WASM ecosystem is using for these interfaces. We are also looking at how we want to handle like large file stuff. So when you're doing like image processing or large files across to a blob store, that we can handle it a little more cleanly and nicely. We want to really polish up the Go SDK, work on making like linked S 2.0. So just having like better things that can give you hints of what type of data should be passed in to configure your actor. And then we also want to completely revamp WasmBus RPC so that we can just make that developer experience a lot better. So that's the next category. Like I said, those are pretty concrete. We have an idea of what they're doing, but they're not currently being worked on right now. And then we have the ideas list. And we're calling it this because these could drop off. These could never happen. These could just be nice ideas that turn out to be bad ideas down the line. What will happen is we take these and we'll move them into next as we decide we're going to as we decide we want to do them. So this is stuff like we've talked about enabling JavaScript actors. That'd be a big one we really want to do. We just haven't spec'd it out, and there's a lot of those other things that you saw. And by the way, that's a good point, Kevin. I should probably clarify that. I think one of those is like there's some other things we could do around components and the provider SDKs. That's just what I think I meant there. And so I'll go fix that in about 10 seconds. Might stealth edit it underneath Brooks. And so anyway, so what we're doing with this is we're going to like try to get like unit testing things in place. We're going to have the component things, which I meant to combine those lines, JavaScript host, which is something we've kind of half had for a while. We want to actually make it real, like an embedded first host for small devices or embedded devices, and then also finishing up like making the wasmCloud host multi-tenant. We kind of have that thing there, but just for people who want to host it and be able to run multiple tenants on the same like wasmCloud host, we need to tidy up some of the work there. So that's on the ideas list because we haven't like fully spec'd it out yet. That could move decently quickly. So anyway, like I said, not comprehensive, but we wanted to present it so people in the community could start going in and contributing comments and things to that draft PR to say like, I really think this should be on here, or can you clarify this, or whatever it might be. And we're going to try to keep this up to date. So this will be kind of the place you can go to add any comments or concerns or ideas to in the near future. So that's it from my side, and I'll go ahead and edit that quick fix while Brooks is still here.
Hey Taylor, I have a quick question for you. So, these things are things that we're talking about working on from the maintainer perspective. How are we planning on splitting these out for kind of like, we have things that we want to get done, which are some of the core product or core project things. And there's also plenty of open source contributors who are looking for kind of good first issues or little bite-sized pieces to take and work on. Are these going to be broken down into like a couple of different issues? Are we going to, how do we designate what's, is there something that only a maintainer could work on and like stuff that the community only is work on? Like how are we going to do that separation?
Most of this stuff is open for anyone to take. For example, finishing up WebAssembly and the SQL v2 contract are like very much a single project that one or two people working on that project together. Like it's still done in the community. We push all these things up, but it's just it's such a like big unit of work that like will be people from the community who have like touched this before and been doing it will probably be the best candidates. A lot of the stuff in the next category, because it's not already spec'd out and kind of have some ideas around, are perfect things for people to take. I already have some thoughts, for example, around key value contract v2, but someone can open an issue, we'd find it, and I'd comment on what I have, and someone could just take that. People want to add examples, those things are there. There's also, if you're just looking to barely get started, we have good first issue tags in most of our repos. And so you're able to go through and see something small that you could kind of get your feet wet with to do it. A lot of these, like I said, are higher level. And so they can appear daunting, but like if it's something that interests you, like we're all on board and having anyone from the community help implement these. This isn't like only maintainers do it. It's just giving an idea of what us as the maintainers think is going on and what we want to have out. And so people can get excited about it and give us their ideas too.
I think I'll add one more sentiment on top of that. Anytime that there's something like this that you feel like you could contribute to, but you're not 100% sure if you're doing it the right way, or if you're approaching it with the same code style that the wasmCloud projects have used before. I personally love pull requests as a collaboration space, and I think most people on the maintainer side will agree. Feel free to open a pull request at any time. If you've got a halfway there, just looking for a little bit of initial feedback, pull requests are a great way to start looking at code and to collaborate on code because it's out there in the open. We can always kind of go back and forth. These pull requests are not meant to be a space that you have to push perfectly finish rubber stamped code in order to contribute. So just wanted to add on a little bit more there. And Stephen, great kind of follow-on question to that. Are PR drafts okay? Absolutely. I mean, you can do a draft PR, or you can, which is a great way to kind of say, hey, I'm kind of working on this. It's not quite ready for like a full review. I would just denote in your PR description what you're looking for feedback on. If you put draft, since depending on the person, depending on how busy everything is, if seeing a draft PR, it may not get fully reviewed if it's marked as draft, because we may wait for more commits to come in, something like that. All right. Well, then I think that kind of wraps up the roadmap section. Actually, Bailey, is there a
There was a
YouTube?
question. There was a question I just saw. So there was a question from YouTube about like curiosity around the WasmBus RPC plans. Like if we want to do like they said if we want to stream an Apache Arrow like flight encoded by a SQL actor, like would those encodings be spec'd by individual actors or interface, whatever? The wasmBus RPC won't affect that. wasmBus RPC is purely the underlying transport layer between hosts. Anything you built, like it's opaque to it. You don't have to, it doesn't matter what's in it. So if you have specific encoding things you want to do or anything around that, that's purely around how you're designing your application, which could be a custom interface or leveraging one of the current interfaces. Would need more details to kind of like be super specific about it. But yeah, wasmBus RPC is just kind of, it's such a fundamental layer of what's going on that we want to make sure that it's easy to use, it's separated out for actors and providers, it has all of that kind of stuff worked out to just make the developer experience as seamless as possible, which it sometimes has a lot of rough edges as it stands now.
All right. Well, I think this is probably a good time to move on. Let's tackle the last agenda item, and then we can maybe get to some free Q&A time at the end of the meeting. So we had a really fun discussion in the wasmCloud Slack. We're looking at some of the things that we have created names for and set up documentation around. Specifically the name actor for our WebAssembly modules that are composed of business logic that interact with abstract interfaces instead of specific implementations. So things like interacting with a key value contract and then at runtime fulfilling that capability with a Redis implementation or a hash map in memory implementation, things like that. And actor, actually, Kevin, I hate to super put you on the spot here, but I think that you came up with this name for these and would love it if you wanted to add a little bit of color into like what the name came from, what kind of aspects of actors or maybe actor models inspired the name.
So at the core, the definition that I have been going by, at least when coming up with wasmCloud to begin with, was that actors are purely reactive message handlers. If you look at the definition for actor model, the wasmCloud actor meets all of those rules except for the fact that our actors can't spawn other actors. And that's more of a practical concern and a host runtime type concern than an academic one. But yeah, the actor model has been around for a very, very long time. And when I was trying to figure out what it was, a portable piece of independently deployable reactive business logic should be called, actor seemed to fit pretty well.
Nice. I just had to type out that acronym. Portable piece of wait, what was it? Portable. Yeah.
How does one pronounce that?
Yeah. Poppable.
Yeah.
We can call them poppables.
Yeah. Rolls right out the tongue.
Well, so one of the big inspirations for starting this conversation is that when people hear actor, a lot of the time they hear actor model, and depending on what their past programming experiences is like, could either be they've worked with an actor model before and it's been awesome, they've worked with an actor model before and it's been not so awesome, or they haven't really heard of the term before, and so it's kind of a net new thing for them to comprehend. So really just doing some thinking about whether calling them actors is properly priming people for what our wasmCloud WebAssembly modules do. And exploring maybe some alternate namings. Things that came up in the thread were like logical components, application components, functional components, nano services. Thank you, Stephen. I'm just reading off of your bulleted list for things. Napkins, space dust. We got a lot of things in there that we were thinking about. And I kind of have an opinion after reading through the entire thread about what kind of the proper direction is in my mind. But Kevin, I'll let you go first, and maybe Stephen, you too. So Kevin.
Yeah, I think, it's when we build software, and naming is always the hardest part, right? That and rounding off by one errors and cache invalidation. But I think the thing that is, I guess my opinion on this is that if we try and name these actors something that potentially feels more approachable, we also run the risk of diluting the meaning of what it is that one of these components does. So, if we were to call them widgets or poppables or whatever else we could think of, if we use a more broadly scoped term, then it might not be sort of immediately obvious what it is we're trying to build. Of course, the other side of that is for people who aren't familiar with what the actor model is or that terminology, that's a learning curve for them. So I think it's a balancing act, really.
Stephen, did you want to add in some more stuff? Maybe not. Justin, you had your hand up too.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I was just saying, when I came into this, I didn't really understand what an actor was. I hadn't worked with an actor model before. And when I learned what an actor was, I really did like the terminology. But where the friction for me was understanding how to categorize like a grouping of like actors and providers together. So for me, I do like the term actor. I just also want to understand if there's a way to normalize a term for a logical grouping of these components, if that makes sense. Maybe there already is, and I just don't know about it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we've kind of default called them applications because they end up forming a full application at the end of the day.
But it could also be a sub feature if you categorize it. Like maybe I want to build a feature for an app, and I have
sure.
a link definition, which is for the specific actors and providers that remains separate from an overall WADA map. That's where I get
yeah, so not necessarily rolling it all out together, but you could have part of your whole application. Maybe you pulled from an example that handles like authentication or something like that.
Exactly, and then you can have like a function as a service. You can scale more readily the smaller levels of components based on what your application needs.
Kevin?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of address the issue of link definition scope. Right now, link definitions are scoped to an entire lattice. And so one strategy that we've been recommending is that if you want to have if you want to have two different types of configuration for the same set of actors, then you would run that in two different lattices. And if you remember Taylor's roadmap, there is some time on that roadmap to kind of revisit link definitions, and as part of that, we might be reevaluating the scope so that a link definition is more, I guess, more properly part of an application rather than just something that's global to a lattice. But we'll see where that goes.
Justin, why don't we do your thoughts, and then I actually have a little bit more to share, and I want to make sure I get it in the hour slot. So go ahead, Justin. I saw you come off mute in Zoom, but I can't hear you. Are you double muted? Ah, Zoom fails always. Justin is currently live typing his thoughts into the Zoom chat. So we'll read them as they come in, and then or I'll read a little bit. The anticipation, it's killing me.
I mean, I think I have like the 20 hours of Jeopardy music on a loop I could queue up if we need something. Well, really quick, well, Justin, while you're getting your thoughts down, I know you probably have you always have really insightful thoughts for these types of conversations. I'm going to pivot really quick. I want to talk about a couple of really exciting things that are going on in the WebAssembly space, which usually kind of talk about general WebAssembly community at the end, but I want to specifically talk about events. There are a lot of events that are happening this year, and a few of them in kind of the front end of 2023 that we as a wasmCloud team, and probably for Cosmonic, which some of the wasmCloud maintainers work for, we will be at a lot of these events. And I want to both raise awareness for them and encourage everyone who is working in the WebAssembly space, even if you feel like your application, what you're working on, is small. The more submissions that we get for these types of events really help grow the WebAssembly community. And I promise you, whatever you're working on in the WebAssembly space right now is interesting enough for a talk. So would totally encourage you to submit for these. So I actually have 4 that I want to talk about. The first one is Cloud Native WASM Day. This one is going to be in Europe, in Amsterdam. So anybody who's in across the pond, I know we have a really great community contributor, Giuseppe, who is in Italy. I hope that they can make it over to Amsterdam. We can meet them and anybody else who's over there. Submissions are still open. This actually just kind of popped up the other day for Cloud Native WASM Day. So please check out the call for proposals that is due on the 12th of February at midnight Pacific time. There's a ton of different topics. This is going to be a really exciting WASM Day. Last year, WASM Day EU was a really fun conference to go to. A lot of us actually got to meet for the first time there. In the same vein, there is wasm.io, which I keep calling wasmio because it's kind of fun to mash those things up. But wasm.io 2023 is going to be in Barcelona. That's actually at the end of March, so in Europe a little bit before that. CFPs, I believe, are no longer open for this, but you can still get your ticket. And we have personally submitted a few talks. So here's to hoping that we can get in and talk to all you beautiful people about the fun stuff that we're working on. In terms of WebAssembly conferences, there's also going to be the WebAssembly Summit. And this has been one of my favorite WebAssembly conferences that have happened. It started, if I remember right, in 2019. So it was right before the pandemic, and then was online for a little while. But I believe that they're actually going to be doing things in person in London, and then also live streaming, all of it as usual. One of my favorite WebAssembly talks that I've ever seen came out of this conference, which was Peter, I'm forgetting his last name, who used WebAssembly in the browser to make music, which was so fun. If I can dig up that link, then I'll put it somewhere. So talk submissions are still open for this one, but they actually close next Tuesday. So make sure to get on this if you are planning to submit a talk. And then coming up soon is Cloud Native Security Con in North America. And this is not a WebAssembly specific conference, but our very own Kevin Hoffman is going to be speaking at this one.
I can actually probably see the schedule. If we look for Kevin, there it is, Zero Trust in the Cloud with WebAssembly and wasmCloud. And this is, I'm happy to let Kevin, if you'd like to add a little bit more information onto this, but this talk is going to be all about the different levels of security that you get, starting with WebAssembly. So not wasmCloud specific, it's all the deny by default, sandbox model things, and then all the levels that we add on while we add functionality with wasmCloud. Kevin, did I do your talk abstract decent justice?
Yeah. It's first, I'm just trying to figure out where that picture of me came from. I have way more hair than that, so I'm not sure what's going on. Yeah, a clipping error. But yeah, the basic idea behind the presentation is to go from the low level WebAssembly at its lowest level and talk about the security there, and then just kind of go on a journey from there all the way up through the various runtimes and then through wasmCloud with an eye for how security works at each one of those levels.
So this one is going to be really sweet. If anybody can make it to this conference, I think it's in, is it in LA? Can't seem to, Seattle, close enough. West Coast, all the same. Sorry. Yeah, it's going to be in Seattle. This one is going to be fun. Hopefully this is also live streamed, but I'm sure the talk will be uploaded to YouTube after the fact. So yeah, lots of exciting conferences and events coming up in the year. I'm sure that there's going to be more and more announcements about conferences that we're going to when we're talking about wasmCloud and things like that. But this is starting off the year on a pretty fun note. I know that we ran a little bit over time. It's 2:02, so I want to thank everybody for being here for this community meeting. Really awesome, really great questions and conversation. And I'm going to be putting together the notes and the recording after the fact so we can get it up on the wasmCloud, the wasmCloud site under the community section. Let's see. I think that's it. Bailey, Taylor, Kevin, any kind of final notes before we sign off?
Do you want to read out and so that everybody doesn't die of anticipation of what Justin was typing?
Oh yeah, that's right. Sure. I actually haven't gotten to read it myself, but I'm just going to read the whole thing. So given the history of the actor model, this is all Justin's words. I didn't come up with whatever brilliant things I'm about to say, and the need for ongoing education for many computer science and individuals, I actually think the actor model may need something like what the Illustrated Children's Guide gave to many, which I think is like a Kubernetes Illustrated Children's Guide. Maybe meaning the actor model needs to be personified as it is with existing language and terminology, but characterizations that make it more approachable, which I think in the chat got kind of a resounding, ooh, this is a really cool idea. And I like that. I really like the idea of, with and to summarize what I kind of was going to say before the discussion, I think that actor is a very fair name for what we call our WebAssembly modules, and it really accurately describes what they are. So even with some preconceived notion, I think that it properly describes what we're doing. So I really love this idea of taking the education route and taking something like the actor model and adding in some extra fun things like illustrations and things like that. All right, prevented death by anticipation. I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream. Thank you all for tuning in across all of the different channels. Anybody who is hanging out here, welcome to hang out in the Zoom for a little bit longer if you'd